Welcome back to The Things We Know. I'm Lisa Callahan.
And I'm Kari Morin.
And so today we're going to talk about numbing, why people numb, how they numb, maybe look a little under the hood at addiction and decide if we think addiction is the problem or if it's just the symptom of some kind of pain or absence.
And is it a thing? Like, is it, or can it be healed or solved or looked at differently?
I mean, we are not experts. We
Nope.
don't even play experts on TV. We don't. On the topic of addiction, there's lots of strong opinions and findings and research on whether someone can overcome it, if abstinence is the only way. I know there's a million dissenting opinions as well. Again, we're not experts. We're not even really here to share opinions, although we might, because it is The Things We Know. But we work with people who are numbing, whether they call it addiction or not. We love people who are numbing, whether they see themselves as an addict or not. I mean, clearly my brand is drinking, amongst other things. And so it's a question that's rolled around in my brain about myself several times. I definitely think I have addiction in my family. So I think that's the other thing that's interesting around, like, how genetic is it? I don't know.
Yeah. And you know what? I mean, I don't disagree with anything, right? Because there's definitely addiction in my family, alcohol abuse and other types of addictions, which we want to talk about as well, because numbing covers so many types. And I think we might, if we have time, we might just kind of, get into that, because as coaches, we are like highly aware, and just as women and adults in this world, because we have a pulse, the amount of numbing behavior out there is, I feel like it might be at an all-time high. I can't verify that, factually, but the amount of people referring and talking to us about, like, oh, I just, I'm just binge watching, or I'm just shopping all the time, or, and then there's some other ones that are not the things you think about, but they're equally problematic, right? Like gambling or online shopping or porn, things like that. But anyway, on the topic of addiction, like, I do think some is genetic. We do know this factually, some people's livers don't process sugar very well. And that's often why they don't do well with alcohol, and why they have this insatiable, need. I can't talk on the science of that, but I do believe that. I also believe it, there's just genetic behavior that gets passed down as well. And genetic responses, or maybe not even genetic, but learned responses to stress that get passed down and become normalized, and, kind of become desensitized to it. So yeah. And again, we're not getting into all that. There is a book, though, in my early on as a coach, a friend of mine who had started some really cool alternative to 12-step programs. He had no problem with it. He's sober himself, and he went through it himself, but realized there was a gap out there in the recovery world around, for people who weren't Christian, because it's so Christian based, the 12-step program, right? AA, and nothing but admiration for AA, nothing at all. He started a couple residential addiction programs, in one way later down the line was somewhat controversial, because it was using marijuana in California when it was becoming legalized as a gateway off of some of the major drug addictions.
Yeah.
And at the time that was so controversial, I think it's probably very common now. And so he wanted me as a health coach to, he just wanted to experiment with having me meet with some people in that program. Some of them were young men, some of them were their mothers. And sometimes I worked with both. So it was fascinating and it was really fun. And I came across this book, Addiction is the Symptom, by Rosemary Ellsworth Brown. And I understand that it is controversial for people, because, it does sound like her own sort of, I think there might even be 12 methods that she takes people through, feels like it's the anti to the 12-step program. Oh, and I think you're like me. It's like, dude, whatever works for you.
Totally. Whatever gets you through the night.
Yeah. And what I liked about it is this idea that and there's a study, and I want to say it's Denmark, but I could have the country wrong, where they looked at addiction differently and said, like, what's missing? And like addiction to them was the absence of connection. So where they lacked any connection to self or source or others or community, they were reaching for something, right? And so when they addressed that in this study, and it was funded, they saw the like predilection or the cravings go away. So that fascinated me. And then this book also did too, right? It's this perspective that addiction is a symptom, that it's not a standalone issue. It's not the problem. It's not like, oh, you have a craving for alcohol. That's the problem. No, that's a symptom of something else is missing. There's some deeper pain there. Just a manifestation or result of underlying emotional, psychological, physiological, or social factors. So in that context, addiction can be seen as a response to deeper issues or imbalances in someone's life. And like, to help us understand it, it's like, is it an escape mechanism? Are there underlying issues, right? Like self-esteem, loneliness, trauma, isolation, loneliness, like those kind of things. Psychological factors. Is there some sort of non-neurotypical situation that's isolating them that makes them think that leads them into that behavior, and then they get classified and treated like an addict, right? Or like, lack of skills, poor impulse control, things like that have been misdiagnosed. I actually have a client whose husband was misdiagnosed with like they missed something. They missed like an ADHD or something like that. And often those go together, addiction and ADHD. And once the ADHD was addressed, the addiction behaviors went away.
Well, let me ask you this, like let me just ask, in that instance, because to me, like logically, that makes sense. So the couple of questions that comes up as you're saying all of this, and I don't know if you know the answers, but
probably not. Again, I'm just sort of fascinated by this, but go ahead.
No, I know. And I guess I mean the answers from a standpoint, like you've read the book. Like, so if you have somebody who genetically has addiction in their bloodstream, let's say, right? And then they have this disconnect, right? There's something that's missing. Are they more likely to reach for something to fill that hole? And again, it doesn't have to be alcohol and drugs. It can be shopping. It can be gambling. It can be sex. It can be binge watching Netflix. I mean, that it's all those things count.
They'll give you dopamine hits, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Anything that's, filling that hole. So if there's somebody like that has addiction in their DNA, so to speak, versus someone who doesn't, although I'm not sure there's anybody in the world that really doesn't have some lineage to it, and they have something missing, do they cope with it differently?
I think there's like probably multiple answers to it, but
okay.
I think what I love about this idea and like these studies in this book is that it might be harder for somebody
if it's genetic,
right?
You've got genetic,
but my interpretation, again, I am no expert here. My interpretation is that you can still go to root causes and really make it much easier to overcome it. Like it's this idea that like people aren't broken, right? Like you're not broken there, but what do we still get to tap into here and heal and pay attention to and find the needs that need to be met? And then maybe these are generational needs that haven't been met, that like, we can really do some deeper healing here that can make it so much easier to find your resilience and feel like yourself again. So you can go about the things you want to do. You're not cursed, maybe. Like that's the idea I love about this. Like I remember there's something just right on the back of the book. At the heart of this new approach is step 4. Maybe there are steps. Recast to heal the cause. Precise instructions eliminate the usual trial and error and the usual self-judgment. There's nothing wrong with you. What's wrong is all the garbage piled on top of you. Here is a way to get your authentic self out from under a lifetime of conditioning that is fueling your addictive behaviors. So I love that idea that like because I do know people, I don't know if you do too, that like sort of gave in to their addiction because they're like, well, my mom and her
Yeah,
mother
that's what I was
before, and like, I'm
thinking.
just gonna, yeah, this is what we do. Versus like, what if we could, disrupt that?
Yeah, that's exactly as you were going to read that, I was thinking, you could potentially use genetics as a crutch, as a throwing your hands up. Well, I was born this way, right? And if you subscribe to this thought process at all, it gives you choice. It gives you options. And that actually feels really lovely and hopeful.
Right. Versus, and again, all due respect, for some people, the idea of just saying I'm powerless and
Yeah.
I mean, I am a big fan of like, give me the grace to accept the things I can't change. That's fine.
For real.
But saying I'm powerless, like, does take away for some people the opportunity to holistically address the underlying factors. Like, I think I was telling you before we hit record, I think both, if you ever listen to We Can Do Hard Things, both Glennon and Abby are in recovery. And Glennon has a beautiful way of saying, like, you were drinking to not know the things like there's things you're aware of. And if you don't want to deal with your awareness of it, you might want to numb.
Yeah.
And it's so much easier to do that. So like, I think what this is saying is, let's make it less scary and give you tools to address the things that you don't want to deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get, again, to me, what this does is give hope, because if you just fall down the rabbit hole of, this is in my lineage, this is my so-and-so is an alcoholic, and this person was an alcoholic, and then so of course I'm an alcoholic, then you've just given up any sense of being able to work it through. There might still, you might totally work it through, and there might still need to be abstinence. That's fine. But what if that's not the only answer?
Right. And I think like, I want to, like, it was just because I have so many people in my life, like I want to just presence the fact that so many people, and you've seen it depicted in film and, in stories that are addressing addiction, will say, I don't understand how people can have just one. Like, that's just bizarre to me.
Yeah, I don't think they do.
And I want to respect that and say, like, it's not so easy to be like, let's get at the root cause and just have one, or like, I really need to have none and really work on this. All of that is valid. And I get that. Like, that part is really important to address. And yet there are people who on the other side of this are like, oh, that's not what it was. It wasn't that I'm psychologically unable to do it. It was that I finally addressed the deeper pain. Right. And again, I'm not saying that's the case for everyone, but I think it offers options for people and hope.
Yeah. And let me clarify, I misunderstood what you were saying. You were saying some people can just have one drink. I thought you meant one addiction. Cause I think oftentimes when there's, you replace an addiction with another addiction. Right.
Oh, yes.
And so I think most people who have addictions, and not all of them have to be deadly. Right. I mean, like, I do love to, like, when I'm bored, I love to just go on Amazon and look at shit, sometimes I put some things in the basket and then I don't order them, but I mean, that dopamine hit in moments of absence, of fun, of enjoyment. If you are going through a rough time, like, I don't know that there's any, I just think most people with addictions probably have more than one.
I remember someone asked, like, what is the definition of addiction? And it's like anything you do that you wouldn't want people to see you doing, but that you can't stop, or you feel like you can't stop, or you really feel good when you do it, but you wouldn't want people to see you do it or something. And that's no official definition. That's just something I heard someone say, but that landed for me when I was like, do I want people seeing me watching like Sex and the City all over again? I've seen it before.
You just outed yourself. So
yeah, right? Like, do I? Yeah.
I think that's kind of an interesting question to ask yourself.
But I also think there's compulsions in ways that we're aware, because we're going to get into that in a second. Numbing, but like, and I don't even know if this was numbing, but like habits. Yeah. Like you and me being like addicted to news and then replacing
Yes.
it with something else, right? Replacing it for you, like with music. And that's like a
Yeah.
happy habit and a happy, like, like way to get your hit. But
Yep.
like, I think what we're trying to say here is, it's so easy to other the people with alcohol and drug addictions and not look at other ways we numb. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about numbing.
Yeah. I mean, I personally always go, again, just because of my long time in the diet industry, numbing with food. I had somebody ask, well, I think you actually asked me once, did you ever emotionally eat? And I said,
Everybody does.
everybody does, because, even eating when you're bored, I mean, that is filling a hole, when you're bored, that's an emotion. So, I mean, do you have to be a food addict to numb with food?
No, but this is great. And I wasn't planning on sharing this, but I would love to give a plug for Sama Belbaki, who, she is an emotional eating coach. One of the things I love that she's doing out there differently, because this is such an addiction thing. Food addiction is real. And people who numb with food is a real thing. And there's reputable health coaching and institutions and like emotional eating things that are literally out there giving advice to drink water, go for a walk, fold laundry. And like what they don't see that they're doing is they're giving you, like distraction strategies for something that's a distraction anyway, right? It might be a numbing distraction, but it's a distraction. Instead of getting to the root cause, she's out there educating people about if you had emotionally immature parents, even if they were loving, even if you love them, you might not have gotten your needs met. So you might have learned to meet those needs with food. And that's where you finally get your needs met in the day. And you might even be repeating that in your relationships. Just getting people to take the step back and see where it came from is how you start to get power over it and move beyond it. It doesn't mean you're just going to do that forever. But unless you're aware that you're, doing things to numb, you're not really ever, going to move through it.
Yeah, I mean, this numbing here, I'm going to read. So it refers to a psychological and emotional state where individual consciously or unconsciously tries to suppress or avoid uncomfortable or distressing feelings, thoughts, or experiences. And it can manifest in a range of behaviors and coping mechanisms that aim to dampen emotional pain or distress, fill a need, fill a hole, in my mind. And it can be considered a symptom of underlying psychological, emotional, or relational issues. So again, I don't necessarily think it's always about pressing down your feelings. I think it's, but if you can understand, I mean, when I was in Weight Watchers, the question I always said is, that moment where you go to reach for something and you ask yourself, am I hungry or am I trying, or am I bored? Am I hungry or am I pissed? Am I hungry or am I, you might answer, yeah, no, I'm pissed and I want to eat this ho-ho. Great. Then you've just made a choice, but I think when you can ask yourself when you can figure out what the root cause is, it doesn't mean you won't still do the numbing thing, but now you've made an active choice, which is different than just mindlessly numbing yourself.
100%. Yes. And I think obviously we've already kind of touched on these things. Like what are some of the symptoms, right? If addiction is a symptom, it can be anything from like trauma, depression. It could be, that you've misdiagnosed something or you've missed something. Anxiety, grief and loss, stress and overwhelm, avoidance, really avoiding like something you need to address can really push people into numbing. I mean, I think that's a classic avoidance thing. Like, I don't want to do this thing. I'm going to watch something or, I'm going to go make a snack, like whatever. But relationship issues is the one that stands out to me. I think you and I, we've talked about that. We definitely know people that we've worked with people that, as clients who are like, oh, I'm not addressing this, so I'm doing this, and we're like, how do you know? And this is where they think they have a drinking problem. But this is what I've always loved about coaching too, is like people come to us like, oh, I've been eating, like I'm overeating, or like I have a compulsion to like snack. But the more and more I ask questions, especially when I was health coaching, it's like, oh, you hate your job.
Yeah.
All the broccoli in the world isn't going to solve that. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you know, or, oh, you don't really like your partner right now. So you don't like this eating issue came to me about is really a symptom of that. So like, what if
Yes.
we looked at that? That's what I love about the, like looking at things. It's not always that simple, but when it is, oh, so helpful.
No, I mean, honestly, I think the bottom line here is there are people that are actually have addiction issues. And there are people who might question whether they have addiction issues. And therein lies where it might be a symptom of a root cause. Right. Because I do think there's, and again, totally my opinion, and you can push back on this, but like someone who has addiction issues, I don't, perhaps getting at the root cause is just a new understanding that helps them get through the addiction issues. It doesn't make the addiction issue go away. Right.
Yes. Yeah.
Versus somebody who it's a symptom, but there's a word for it. I binge eat, I emotionally eat, I drink too much. They might not be an addict, but there is a way to work through that once you know the root cause.
Right. And and to be clear, like there's a lot of schools of thought out there that would agree that there's just addicts, somatics. And then there's other people who are like, everybody can get to the root cause and has a chance at healing. I don't know if I know enough to agree or disagree with that.
Yeah.
But yes, I would say that's kind of like my intrigue with this is,
it is fascinating
because we're human
Yeah.
and we are going to find ways to not feel the painful things unless we're like committed to getting to the other side of it. And even those of us who want to, like, that's easier said than done.
Oh my God.
And I was thinking about some of these ways people, like some of this is so obvious, right? There's obviously substance abuse, overeating, emotional eating, you know, excessive screen time. Some of these, I compulsive shopping, those kind of things, avoidance of activities. But some of these are really interesting to me, like, or the engaging in risky behaviors. Totally seen that. The constant busyness. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yes. Like I can think of 3 or 4 people right now that I will try not to out, but like, yeah, that is constantly, if they stay committed and they stay busy, there's some hit they get from that allows them to not deal with the other stuff. And it becomes an addiction. And I've said this to people like, wow, you could take any job. You could take like a docent job and make it stressful, but like, you're going to fill all your time so that you don't have to like actually feel or address things. Using humor. I've definitely been there. Like, oh yeah, everybody loves a clown, right? Excessive exercise. That's another interesting one. Way to numb. I'm like, oh, that's a little painful, but you know, but for some, I get it. Like that's where they stay ahead of whatever it is. My mom, and I've talked about that. Like, you know, sometimes if you're planning travel, you know, you don't have to sit long enough with your grief, right? So a lot of this like feels like really good intention, exercise, making people laugh, being busy, like.
But is it, but what strikes me, especially about the exercise thing, is it's that if you're feeling no control in your life and you can pick something that you can be in control of, exercise, self-deprecating humor, you know, what shopping, I don't know. I mean, exercise is the one that really lands to me because I feel like sometimes people pick that I'm going to exercise over exercise because I can control that. I can't control how I'm eating.
Oh, you just used the most magic word here. Cause that's something I learned I relearned when we were doing the diet culture stuff is, you know, and one thing we didn't even talk about here, but you know, eating disorders is another sort of manifestation of this. It's so much about control. So much of this is like, I can't control that. So I'll control this.
Right. Exactly.
Right? So it's exactly like it is when we can make people safe with themselves to not feel like they have to control it to be safe, like that they can actually let their guard down. A lot of shifts can happen. That takes a while, right? And it's important to talk about like some of these things sound like coping, and they are. Sometimes when they get excessive, they become numbing, but it may only provide temporary relief. It can also contribute to a cycle of avoidance. I don't want to feel that, so I'll do this.
Yeah. Yeah. And so again, I mean, it's, and you've said it several times, but it's worth repeating this. It's simple without being easy, right? Like stopping and asking a question. I'm about to do this that I know I don't really want to do. Eat, drink, overexercise, fill in the blank. What do I need instead? You may not have the answer. It may not change the outcome, but it gives you that moment of choice. That's just the thing I keep coming back to, is when you take a moment to ask the question, what do I need here? The answer may still be a whole sleeve of cookies. Great. Do it. Then you've made the choice to eat a whole sleeve of cookies. No judgment. No feeling.
No, I'm just like picturing a sleeve of Thin Mints, Girl Scout Thin Mints. When you said that.
100%. I mean, that is a sleeve of Thin Mints is actually a serving. I mean, I think we all know that.
Yes.
If
Let's
it
just
wasn't
be honest
a serving,
here.
it wouldn't be in its own sleeve. I don't understand what people don't understand.
I mean, they aren't meant to like, be wadded up. Come on. That's so good. No, I think you're right. I mean, because what you're bringing up here too is, I think what gets tricky is where we can start judging it or like projecting bad stuff with it. Like, it is not bad for me to have a glass of wine or two. It is not bad for me to watch something. It's actually really good for me sometimes to have some neutral time. I think my challenge is not to feel like I have to be folding laundry to do it.
Right.
For someone who has like, who never has time to be bored. And I do think that's a worthy thing to shoot for, to like be bored, because it's like creativity happens. I have to watch, not just calling that kind of behavior as bad or addictive. Like I have to like not judge it. It's not that I don't have numbing stuff. It's not that I haven't dealt with that. It's just that it gets tricky when you like drinking's bad. No, it's not, like, oh, nothing's bad unless you feel like it, unless you really are able to step back and say, oh, am I using that to avoid this?
Right.
And doesn't even mean it's going to remain bad. It just might mean like, red flag here or pink flag here, like there's like there's just something to pay attention to here. And not to like, throw it all out as like, it's bad. It's not, I'm saying that because lately I've been like, I had one day where I coached from 6 a.m. till 1 p.m. Like it wasn't meant to be that way, but it just stacked that way because of some different things. So I went straight through. And even in some of that, like I was live, on a webinar. And then I cooked dinner that night, which was pretty impressive. But somehow in between that 1 p.m. and dinner, I was like making dinner going, God, I'm so lazy. I just sat around all afternoon. Like I watched something, or I can't remember what I was doing. I was intending to do other things though.
Right.
And I did something kind of numbing.
Yeah.
Was that bad or did I need it? Right. And so like what I told myself was it was unhealthy and it was like, and I lost time. And I really, it was such a reversion for me because I've been so way beyond that and I help people with that. But it's funny how it will sneak back in and I can label it as avoidance or what, when stuff like maybe I needed to feel the grief that was happening in my world at that time. And like, that's what I did. And it's really okay. Even if it included a sleeve of cookies, and I wish it had, it would have been okay.
Well, again, it goes, and we say this a lot, it's judgment versus curiosity. The minute you judge your afternoon as bad, you cut off the curiosity of, but why did I do that? Now clearly you've gone back and got curious and changed your mind about that. But judgment just, man, that like brings down a big steel door,
Right.
and there's no getting around it.
And I think it's important because I don't know anyone who struggles with addiction or who's struggling with pain that they sometimes need to numb it. And like, that's a worthy thing to do sometimes. Like,
100%.
I really need to I need to slow down the pace of this coming at me. So I'm going to numb a little. And like, that sometimes is like prescribed by a therapist, right? Like go watch something, have some neutral time. So I don't know anyone going through that who doesn't have the cycle of shame and judgment wrapped up in it.
Yep.
And that just makes it so much harder. And so like, that is one of the things I loved about the description of this book from the reviews, even if it's controversial, is like, it allowed people to unbury themselves from all the labels and all the judgment and all the garbage and say like, oh, I am not my addiction. I'm me. I've experienced pain. and this is how I've been coping with it. And this is
Yeah.
where I might need help. And this is where I might start getting stronger with this kind of, redirection. So I think that's what I like about it, is like, stop identifying with it and really try and step back from your own judgment and the projected judgment and the actual judgment of the world. Cause it sucks. Everyone's got an opinion about this stuff.
Yes, apparently we do too. Although again, as we're having this and we're sort of wrapping this up before I share the song, what I'm taking away from this, first off, thank you for putting this all together, because it's fascinating, but everybody's going to handle it differently, and this is another school of thought. Doesn't take away abstinence. It doesn't take away 12 steps. It's another option that may land exactly right for someone, or it might say, or they might be like, nope, that's not me. I need abstinence. I need 12 steps. Great. Hallelujah. What you do, you, and I say that in the most supportive way, but being open to opportunity and options like this, I think is valuable. I mean, I just feel like we brought something forth that maybe people aren't familiar with.
It's a little bit like religion. I always say, like, there's many ways to get to Chicago. There's not just one way, right? So there's many ways to get to like the healthier version of you. And because you just said that, I really do want to say, I was walking with a friend recently who was like, has been doing so much work on herself for a lot of reasons. Just a lot of upheaval happened in her life. And so she's done all the work, like really kind of exercised all the demons, because she had to face some hard stuff that was going on in her life. And because of that, is super aware again about like, like the sobriety movement and like, people and just being our age and trying to figure out, is the healthiest way for me to go forward this or this? And she's like, still like my glass of wine every night. Is that a problem? Am I addicted? And like, I had some thoughts for her at the moment. And then I also followed up later and I was like, no, I mean, is it something you feel like you don't want people to see you do? She's like, no. And is it causing a problem? And she's like, I don't know what you mean. And later I said, it sounds like the only problem it's causing is you're trying to judge yourself for it. And sometimes we see it as a problem, even for someone to have one drink, if they're not doing their work, if they're not dealing with a lot of like suppressed anger or resentment or stuff, it'll bubble up when someone's drinking. We all know, right? We all know people like that. We've probably all been there, right? Like, I'm just saying, like, you've done that work. There's nothing that's gonna like percolate out. So enjoy your freaking drink. Like enjoy it. It's just like what we say in health coaching, like, don't sneak the cookie, put it on your favorite plate. You deserve it. And then it has a lot less power over you. It's not about control. It's just about enjoying a fucking beverage.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Well, I didn't know this was the route we were going. Again, great work. Thank you for all of this. But I knew we were having this topic, and this song came into on one of my playlists recently, and I was like, oh, this is the song I want to quote for numbing. So it's Crowded House, Can't Carry On This Way, off their first album. And the lyrics are, well, here we go again. Though I look everywhere, I never seem to find it. Always a shadow round a corner. Drown it in alcohol, stuck in the elevator, hard to remember in the morning. I can't carry on this way. I should just go to sleep. Before it gets too late, just go to sleep. Doing damage to my brain, just go to sleep. Well, here we go again. He might have an issue. I was having this conversation the other day with a friend. I was like, listening to Crowded House in high school is a different experience listening to Crowded House in my 50s. I was like, I'm hearing new things in these songs that I didn't hear before. I think Crowded House is a fascinating band because I feel like they're so happy, like music go lucky. And if you listen to the lyrics, I have a feeling the Finn brothers have been through a few things is the word I was looking for. And their lyrics are fascinating. So, but that one always catches me.
This does like, we always do this, like it percolates. It makes me think of like another topic would be, and this just came up for me recently, like with someone I work with who was like, I don't know people who have the level of, like potential trauma. We've said it's not even PTSD, it's chronic stress disorder. That Griffin can have a, catastrophic seizure at any time. And he has too many seizures still. So there was that, but just all the other stuff in life that so many of us are in the sandwich generation. And she was like, I mean, do you do edibles? Or, because, and this is a professional, right? And I was like, I have nothing against it and I like it. I just I feel like I have to be sharp in case we have to go to the hospital and I have to respond to stuff and I'm often solo. Anyway, this makes me think like there is some really, like the whole microdosing thing, there
Yeah.
is some really good discussion to keep having, you and I, around this, for people around like, what is like a good level of like comfortably numb, right? But maybe not numb, but just lightness that does help people cope while they're figuring this stuff out. That isn't an addiction, but that helps them feel like they're like really showing up for things without feeling all this debilitating pain. I don't know. And I'm not even sure that's where I'm at this point, but it's such an interesting thing. And I think we both live in states where like this stuff can be explored legally.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting thing that I don't know a ton about, and I would love to learn more and be able to share more about that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely have had the experience of doing an edible to get through something versus doing it because it's fun,
Mhm.
and it's a different experience and
Totally.
both work. On that note,
thank you so much. This has been a fun week, and we'll be back next week. But until then, we really invite you to subscribe wherever you're listening to the pod. If you hit that plus or that subscribe button, you won't miss one. And we're here. We're dropping a new one every Tuesday. Thanks to Lisa, who gets these up and out there consistently like clockwork. So please continue to follow us, and we really appreciate it.
thanks everyone. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.